This is RSG live at the lounge, and we got a friend of the program now. I'm just calling you a friend of the program now. Back in business with us, our man Sean Frazier, athletic director at Northern Illinois University, and I say, this a voice of college sports that I love hearing. I'm following you on Twitter. I'm following you everywhere. When I'm trying to figure out what's going on, I said, let me go see what Sean is saying about what's going on. Last time you were with us, we're a month in, man. And, what I like talking about you, because in your role, you're in these executive meetings where major decisions are being made on all facets. And just in general, what has it been like, over this past month? And where do you see things now, as this senior leader at the university, but also in your work in athletics?
Well, Devon, first off, let me say, as you are a proud alumni of NIU, that's what brings me here. And then obviously at Wisconsin too, that also is helpful. So you're a double threat, as I would call it. So there was no question I was coming back. It was just when I was coming back. So I love your loyalty to NIU, and then obviously your loyalty to higher education and what you do at Wisconsin. So so the question is real, right? Month in, when we first talked, forgot the date, but it's about a month right now. Yeah. And things have not slowed down. Matter of fact, things have picked up because now we have some real clear things that are happening with COVID-19 relative to the mandates, the shutdowns. Now, the new normal for us, just like it is for you, is to instruct online, these video messaging types of things that we do on a regular. Now that's what we do from sun up to sundown. We are communicating with our staffs. We are talking to our students. We are communicating with the public, the community, the campus. It's nonstop. I think that the scary part about this is that the uncertainty. We still don't know what we don't know, right? So part of the process is we're doing a lot of modeling to adjust for the future, and we don't have any concrete answers yet. We know that we have to continue as normal as we can as far as operations, but as we kind of go into now this quasi-spring, summer, and project for the fall, we don't have all these answers, and I would say the financial things are starting to build up, right? The issues about, will we have face-to-face instruction? Will we have fans? Will we have a fall sports season? So all these things are starting to percolate to the point of frenzy, because now it's a month. People are uncomfortable. I'm locked down with my 3 beautiful children, my wife. We're hunkered down in Sycamore, Illinois, and in DeKalb. And we're now trying to figure things out. And we're not close to answers, but we have lots of projections, simulations, modeling. We're doing everything we can to try to figure out what about the future, but we still have this uncertainty. So I'll cut it off there and be able to go into detail. But it's probably more of an uncomfortable situation right now, more so than anything else. And it's really affecting higher education. College athletics is a component of higher education, but higher education is under some level of attack, I would say. If I were to be provocative in saying that, is because now we're taking a look at different modeling, and our whole model of existence is about instruction and growth for young people to prepare them for citizenship for the society. And part of that is the higher education model is really being affected by not having that face-to-face contact.
And that's the part I know you're in discussions. Right now, higher education institutions at least are running models where, you're going to be virtual in the fall. And that has an impact on enrollment, which puts a lot of strain on the system in the budgets. And, so much of this is being held by and handled by adjunct faculty who are holding up a lot of load, who aren't tenured faculty. I mean, it has an impact on your physical plant staff. I know that, particularly in the work that you do, you have a lot of folks there on the front line there who handle facilities and do a lot of things who are impacted by a decision like that. How are people, what are the things that people are going to help gauge those kind of decisions? And, how are people going to be defining things like essential staff? And how do you have to think about essential staff, as someone who is, working in both of these worlds? Like, you are concerned about construction because you got student athletes and you have requirements that progress towards degree that these students have to be meeting, right? I don't know how the NCAA is talking about that and the impact of those benchmarks that all those students have to do. Like, how are you negotiating this, and how are you thinking through some of those things when you sit at a table that you have to think about the quality of education for all the undergrads, but you also have this really important infrastructure of student athletes that you're working with who have even complex worlds themselves?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I would say that we take it in layers, right?
Yeah.
Waves. We're dealing with from a senior cabinet standpoint. So President Lisa Freeman, our president, she's doing a phenomenal job, but she's also, she's torn in 5 different directions, probably more so. Five is probably easy for her. It's multiple directions. Looking at the academic affairs side, the student affairs side, the auxiliaries, the community. There's a lot of different facets.
Yeah.
So as I sit around that table and advise and be a part of that particular leadership team, those shared governance components, right, of higher ed, we're trying to socialize and talk about those particular impacts. As it relates to athletics, yes, the eligibility concerns, what we're dealing with the current trends, because we're still dealing with name, image, and likeness, which is another component of the legislation that's currently going on. That's probably for another show, but we could probably touch on it here. But then, we're talking about the basics. How are we operating virtually, online, and making sure we're satisfying all the NCAA requirements for degree completion, right? And for matriculation. So all these things that we're talking about that, we have got a crackerjack team. We have a number of my senior staff that are quite frankly programmed and educated on these areas, but we're doing a lot of this through online education. So those considerations pop up all the time. We meet every day on that. So my senior staff, I'm meeting with them every day. We're going through a laundry list of issues. Then we have our own individual meetings to make sure that we're on point. Then we're meeting as a conference to talk a little bit about how that's affecting the conference. And then we're talking about, we're having webinars on trends that are happening nationally. So you can imagine the plethora of information that boiled down. And then we're having these types of conversations like I'm having tonight with you.
Yeah.
So part of the short answer is just making sure you're informed. And it's very important that you complete the task of communication and getting that communication to all of your people that you're working with and working for right away, because the next hour, it can completely change again. We talked about the speed of the game last time. We talked about the amount of rate of information that comes down and boils down to it. So the checkoffs on these things are extreme, Devon. I'm not gonna lie to you. Probably the most extreme in my career that I've seen. But I will tell you that you're only as good as the leadership team that we have at NIU. I'm feeling very comfortable by our president, our senior vice presidents, our senior team, and then my unit specifically. Having seen a lot of different adversity issues, we've had the budget impasse back from 15 to 17 where we saw massive cuts and different things. So we're a bit battle tested when it comes to being lean from a financial standpoint, but this uncertainty takes it to the next level. We're just uncertain because it's hard to prepare for things that might or maybe will happen, but we have to model for the worst to make sure that we preserve the best. So we're in that planning, that modeling, as we kind of go into another question, you'll probably ask me, life without football possibly.
Yeah, that's where I want.
So those are things that we're doing right now. And it keeps it lively. I tell you one thing, ain't nobody having grass grow underneath their feet right now. It's real. It's real.
It's real. And, it's interesting, and people who may not know your story, your background, I saw the coach from your alma mater. They got Nick Saban out there, and Power Five conference folks have, entirely different framework sometimes. But they're all in this bucket as well. But, and people throwing out proposals around seasons and everything else. And, you hear, SEC commissioner talking about, we can't see having football without fans, and all these things are happening. I'm talking to my niece. She plays down in Indiana. They're all practicing they're all working out with their trainer online, and they're all on Zoom, and they got their workouts in the room. Like, there's so many moves, but football, it's like your body gets trained for it, get ready for it. And, we're hearing models where people are thinking about maybe spring football. What has this conversation been like, starting from like your spot, thinking about your department? Now you having this conversation with the MAC folks, and then now you get into this national conversation. What are some of the emerging models? What are some of the key issues that y'all are trying to unpack to understand whether or not we need to move forward with playing without, fans possibly, and just working that one, or playing in a certain location, which is harder to do. You can do it in pros. You can't really, it's hard to do at college. And you got, what you do for Division I is different. You guys still got Division II, you got JUCO, you got Division III. Like, there's some layers to this who don't have the same capacity. But starting with, like, decisions you're having, your conversations you're having internally, what's been the MAC conversations been like? And then you hearing some of these proposals where, they're going to ask you to weigh in, Sean. How would you weigh in? What would you be thinking, when you think about the long-term benefit of the game?
Yeah, so, life without football, boy,
wow.
My blood pressure just got raised up a little bit. Look at the models, right? Yeah. So football, for a lot of these large institutions, these Power Five or Autonomous Five institutions, means everything. It's built around that economic engine, right?
Yes.
You feed that beast. So for football not to happen is draconian. Yeah. It's almost heresy.
Yes.
No one wants to see that happen, especially with these larger budgets that have built debt service on facilities, academic support, financial welfare, corporate marketing, fundraising. I can go on and all these different pieces. So for something like that to happen would be devastating for some athletic departments, especially those athletic departments that do not have the adequate resources or reserves to be able to deal with that, because they're pretty much living paycheck to paycheck relative to how good or bad a football season happens. So I'll just put that one out. Okay. I think that the modeling for us is a little different model. We're one of the most cost-efficient athletic departments, and specifically football programs in the country.
I saw that ranking.
We have that ranking. We're number 1 in our conference, number 2 nationally. That just came out last year. So we do it the right way because we've had to. Let's just let's be fair. But we also have maximized that, and we have done that on a regular basis. And I would also argue that a lot of our MAC brother and sister institutions have done that well. So a little pat on the back for our conference. But I will say, going back to what we've modeled, a situation where no conference, no non-conference scheduling would happen. We've modeled where we just do a conference schedule. We've modeled where maybe in January we don't play any conference games because we had talked about COVID-19 maybe circling back because of the colder weather. A lot of our experts are saying that maybe this comes back after the warm winter, the warm weather goes away. So we've modeled those right away. Worst case scenario, no football, we've modeled that. Best case scenario, postponement, deferment, maybe something down the line, maybe something that happens in the fall and that finishes up in the spring semester. So again, all of the models are on the line. We're constantly doing that. And if you are a good forecaster or a budget manager, you're constantly making sure you have that data in front of you. But I think the bigger issue and the most direct question, if that does happen, if God forbid football does not played in this academic year, where we see it in 20 fall and 21 spring, if it doesn't happen, we will see, quite frankly, a major shift in higher ed and specifically athletic departments and how they will function, because financially you'll see a lot of issues relative to the funding model of college athletic departments. So I'm not the first to say that. I think people have said that during the course of the time here, but I think it's built on a house of cards relative to how much financial is built into the sport of football. If you take a look at what happened with the men's basketball tournament, that the tournament went away. It was projecting around $600 million about what was lost in that regard, right? You could probably take, I'd say 3, 4, maybe 5 times that amount in a college football playoff series. You're talking about amounts of resources and dollars that are built within the TV contracts and how the operations of Division I FBS football at the Power 5 level operates. So it's significant wealth. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's the right thing. I'm just saying that that's how the business model is set up. So henceforth, there's going to be a lot of motivation, my friend, if you look in my good eye, to make sure that football season happens, especially at the Power 5 level, because of the fact of how many people are impacted relative to how that thing goes. So I think at the end of the day, we will have some level of football season. I think the bigger issue is what's going on with COVID-19. Nobody, and I can say this very, very, very upfront, who's going to put health and safety situations in front of in a scenario where we're going to bet the fact that no one contracts this virus and unfortunately passes away. So henceforth, we're going to have a sign-off. We're going to have a vaccine. We're going to have a major person in the medical community that basically says, you know what, it's okay to conjugate now. It's okay to bring our teams together now. And because we're out of the woods. We're out of any type of a lack of safety. And I think that right now we don't have that. That's why we have the uncertainty. And that's why we're modeling all these different ways for college football. We have a long way to go for that. And I don't know what chancellor or president is willing to step up and say, it's okay to bring our teams back. It's okay to have a football season if they don't have sign off by the right medical experts that are basically going to say that we either have a vaccine or we have a way to control this so other people don't get sick. So there's a dilemma right there, right? I might be Captain Obvious with that, but at the end of the day, that is really the issue now. And that's why the financial impact of what's going on is such a draconian conversation.
Well, and what's interesting about this is that, I mean, a lot of folks have been saying for a long time, we need to, can you keep a model that keeps growing like it has grown? And then you also have the issue of college football in some ways is loosely coupled with the NCAA in a way that college basketball is more tightly coupled, because of the historical nature of the College Football Association, kind of what happened to kind of decouple. Do you see, as a result of this, a more tightly coupled model as we are moving towards more independence? And I know you are, in terms of, thinking about, the group of 5 versus the Power 5, and you were coming up with talking about some different scenarios. There's been scenarios about how we need to be investing in the health of these athletes. I know that's going to come back on the table when you're looking at something like a pandemic, and we're talking about just not only the long-term impact of just playing college sports on your body, as both of you and I could probably feel what needs, and more so than me because of the level of player, but just a lot of these issues that were on the table before this conversation have only been elevated. And, what do you see? I mean, because people aren't going to, we're not going to be the same on the other side of this. I mean, people are not going to be, do you see a possible discussion about the model? That right now, as someone, you got to think about, the pushing your facilities. You got to be in the arms race, and we've kind of gotten away from the essence of what it's supposed to be. Do you see a different model emerging?
Yeah, no, I don't think any of this new normal is going away, if that's what you're asking. I think that we're going to see a significant change in higher education, in college athletics. I think that this was more of a wake-up call about how fragile we really are. I think that we are extremely fragile as it relates to.
And you're not saying that we could be losing some program. Like, we could have people shut down.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think.
I mean, on the other side of this, we could have people kind of like, you know, as you and I have seen in a lot of urban environments where people's high schools don't exist anymore.
Yeah. Well, no, the fragility.
Athletic programs are gone.
Yeah,
right?
the fragility of what we're talking about is something that is a wake-up call. It's a watershed moment. So again, I'm not saying that we're going to have viruses that are going to change the fabric of the world like this all the time. You know, if you look back in our history, you know, we've had the plague, we have the polio. I can go on and on about, you know, how something like this does change life, and then we move on from it. This too shall pass. You know, I don't want to get too Nostradamus in this situation, but I'll say this, that this too shall pass. But what I think is going to change is how we operate, right? Yeah. I think that we're going to get a lot more leaner. I think institutions that were not lean as far as their operations will get forced to be leaner. They will be forced to be thinking about not just expenses, but revenues, and how to have revenues that are sustainable and that will not be impacted by things like this, right? How do we put things into place, and how do we have our spending habits in place where we're not in a situation where it's all for naught, or it's all for one particular item. And right now, it's college football. So I think right now you have a lot of folks sitting around rooms, presidents, chancellors, legislators, folks that are looking at this and say, how do we get to this point? Okay, we get the COVID-19, but you know, why are we so fragile? Why are we so impacted by this? And I think the people are looking at that saying, you know what, we got a plan now to make sure this doesn't happen to us again. Not necessarily that a major virus is not going to happen, because before this we had SARS, before this we had Ebola. You know, I can go on and on about the catastrophic issues around infectious diseases, but part of what this has done is it's changed the fabric on how we do business. We're also talking about between 17 and 19 million people unemployed right now, Devon.
Yes.
Think about that. So the economic impact, the economic impact and the financial downturn that's going to happen post-COVID-19 is going to be significant. So not only are we talking about the impact of this particular sport into higher ed, it's going the fabric of this now with the economic impact in our economy is going to change the way we do fundraising, how do we fund things, how do people go to colleges of higher learning. So all these things are going to be changing. So part of the process is understanding that these seniors that are leaving, you know, I've got a group of seniors that are now looking for jobs, right?
That's right.
And the NCAA were fortunate enough to pass legislation. I'm totally supportive in that. I would have liked the NCAA to dig a little deeper and have a funding source to be able to pay for them. You know, that's a whole nother soapbox I can get on. But I would say this, though, at least, you know, they understood that, not being tone deaf to the fact that a lot of these seniors are going to be really tough to find a job, because we got 17 to 19, probably over 20 million people will be out of work by the time this thing is over and looking for a job, and people have massive layoffs. So we're going to have to deal with that. You know, we've already suspended the Olympics till next year. So those Olympians that were on these different teams out there, so they've got time to study. That's why I'm so happy that we can find a way to help our seniors have another year of eligibility and work within our limits. So there's a lot of implications that have happened. And I think people are sitting around the rooms now and saying, you know what, this thing caught us off guard. The professional programs like the NFL and NBA and Major League Baseball, all these different, they're saying the same things. This thing caught us off board. We need to have people in our stands. We need people to support our endeavor. So we're going to start doing some of the things that we learned while we were held up and having video chats, so we can continue that level of discourse, so we can make sure we look a lot more sustainable in our basic operations. One thing I'll say this, when Disney World shuts down, the greatest place in the world, shuts down and lays off 43,000 people, whatever the number was that they furloughed or laid off. This time for a lot of business that are not operating like a Disney World to sit back and say, wow, we need to change our model. We need to think about this a little bit longer and, quite frankly, come up with a better plan of sustainability. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned for higher ed, looking at some of the private sector and looking at what's happening right now in the world.
And what's interesting about what you said, I was just talking yesterday to a good friend of mine, Dr. PJ Bowman. He played for the Flying Lion. I played with Kendall Gill and those guys, and has sponsored some stuff with us here on RSG. And, you know, one of the things that he talked about, I thought was a good point, back to what you were talking about, the 17 million people unemployed, that part of being able to respond to a pandemic is have a healthy economy and society, you know, to reduce poverty.
Right.
And you know, I know one of the things we know about football, and if we look across a lot of these teams, we have a number of young people who are coming out of working class or, you know, really tough circumstances. We have people across all the economic strata playing college football, but we do have folks that this has been the way out. And we talk about kind of what's the economic stability, you know, how do you break the poverty cycle? Part of it is the educational piece, but part of it is how in a way do we help folks up economically? And I know, you know, you were talking a little bit about likeness and getting into the model about how do we support student athletes who help to build this business. But it is one of the key things to a pandemic is, you know, when you have resources, in some ways you can respond. You can at least you can shack up here a little bit for 3 months and order your food in. You know, you can have a like. That part is part of it. But the other part about it, which is interesting, and I want you to get that part. The second part is being a public university. One of the things, you were at Wisconsin, you know, one of the things that the UW system did and got in back and forth with the legislator about is they did actually what Toyota did prior to the 2008. They had money set aside for a rainy day.
Right.
And people pushed back on the public side. Whereas if universities were able to do that, they would be able to respond to a scenario like this, you know. But as a public university, I mean, when you talk about the financial models, we're going to be to think about, like, if we want to talk about business, you know, Toyota sets money aside. They were like the ones who can navigate the recession because they had already planned for it. They put in ways that we have to also allow, especially our public universities, where a lot of these programs exist, have to have the ability. So, you know, what kinds of models like that, when you're talking about, you know, we're talking about the number of people you employ in an area, you know, people got to work, the way in which you set aside money for a rainy day for things like this, you got to be able to, can you sustain for 6-7 months? You know, how, are those kind of conversations, what kind of conversations are you having around some of those modelings?
Well, it comes down, you just talked about that, you know, for here at NIU, you know, we primarily deal with our first generation, you know, students, you know.
Yes.
You talk about access and opportunity, you know, our institution and our missions and our goals are specific around that, giving folks an opportunity for higher education. You know, some people would say, well, goodness, you know, that's a part of your mission. You should be doing that. You should be making it affordable. You should be making sure that there's folks that would have access to higher education. And you're that regional institution, that research institution that's giving that particular group an opportunity to do that. Different mission, different goals, but at the end of the day, yes, affordability needs to be there, access needs to be there, the ability to better oneself, all those things. NIU is in that picture. What was so attractive to me to go to NIU was all about that particular process. Give people opportunity and access. We have a proud alumni base. We have over 120 to 130,000 living alums in Chicagoland. I'm talking to one right now.
That's right.
You understand what NIU means, not just to the Cal Sycamore, but to the region for what they do, for what they have accomplished. So you're right. You know, to talk about the sustainability side of it, we are a tuition-driven institution, enrollment-driven institution, and the state does recognize that. And I think that at the end of the day, as we went through that budget impasse from 2015 to 17, it was tough, right? Because at the end of the day, our enrollment has dropped, and we've now started to beef that back up because we understood our mission. We know exactly who we are recruiting to our university. We have a proud history behind that, right? And the diversification behind that and the diversity and inclusion component of that is significant. So if we were to close our door, God forbid, if we were to close our doors, we would impact a generation of people that were looking and counting on us relative to access and opportunity. So I think that we have a responsibility to make it affordable. We have a responsibility to make sure that our doors are open for, quite frankly, citizenship for society, for these young people to gain the higher education necessary to be competitive. So I don't want to sound like a politician because I am far from that.
Oh, I know you're not that.
I will say this. I think it's important for us to be fiscally responsible. I think it's important for us to make sure that we do what we say we're going to do. And that basically means that we need to dig really deep to make sure we connect with our constituencies and the state legislators that understand who we are and what we represent and who we put out. So I think it's important to really understand those core values and that mission and to make sure that we operate within that. We have been great stewards of that. That's why I'm very prideful about our operational budgets and what we've accomplished and still been able to win consistently and graduate consistently at a very high level. My issue is right now, we've got some house of cards type of finances that are going on the college athletics side that we've allowed to proliferate higher. Some of that has to do with compensation for coaches and administrators. Some of it has to do with the North American model of sports and how it's supported. Some of it has to do with the fact that, we're a capitalistic society. What the market will bear.
Well, that's one thing I want to hit you on the compensation, because, I just mentioned, Nick Saban, great coach, but for the football coach to be the highest paid public figure, and I'm not gonna put you into the deep water, but
no, don't put me there, please don't ask. Give me some.
I'm gonna give you a lot more latitude about this. I'm gonna give you a lot more latitude around this one, because this is something I'll go out because I'm about free market. I'm with that as well. So I'm not going to, I believe you can make money and still do good work. So, I'm all about that. And I think in many of our neighborhoods and communities you and I care about, we've talked about social justice, but we have not included economic justice. So it's part of our framework. So I'm all about that part with you. So, but part of it is there a scenario where it's where it's something like, you can't make more than a certain percentage of the highest paid person. So like, some of these chancellors are making pretty good money. If you look at, so you can't make, if chancellor's making 2.3 million a year, I'm just putting some money out there. That's on the high end. You can make 3. There's 6 or 7 million, and there's not that many coaches who make it, but now we're offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators are making $1 million. I mean, it puts a lot of stress on the system. This is generational wealth. And so I would say, is there a model without being too regulated that can demonstrate some type of responsibility? And and I'm just trying to figure out, are there models where some type of cap?
So I won't get into that, because at the end of the day, I could sit here and say that everyone making their compensation package is worth it, because I could justify that by virtue of what that individual means to an institution, as well as what that individual is actually bringing into that institution for compensation. So I could go through that. I'm not using Alabama as one, but I'm not trying to be anyone's personal justificator.
And that part I don't want to put.
But what I can say is this: that yes, regulatory is tough, right? To be able to regulate salaries in the state of Illinois versus what happens in Washington D.C. or in Wisconsin. Okay, it's a free market economy. People going to negotiate deals that are working.
But that's part of the house of cards, though.
But it is. I mean, you can do that at certain institutions. You can't do it at all. But the model, and because of the scrutiny, and because of that, we've increased scrutiny around higher ed. We've increased scrutiny about how things are done relative to that. And I think that goes along with this whole reform or this process, or why we're always in a catch-up or justification mode when it comes to college athletics. The newest thing is name, image, and likeness, right? So I think ultimately, until we have that conversation that says, this is our mission, this is how we operate, this is what we need to do to be able to run the operation in an enterprise and be transparent about that process, we'll always be in a defensive mode to try to justify what we do. Now, I would argue there's a lot of more good that's going on out of these athletic departments than not good. I think that people need to, if you're making these types of compensation, if you're doing these types of things, you have to be a big boy and big girl to be able to defend that. But also to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly associated with that. So, and I would say most of the commentary or the narrative or the discourse is positive. We could talk about graduation rates. We could talk about what we're changing the lives out of our young people who wouldn't have that access if it wasn't for a college scholarship. So I can go down that road. But what I guess the biggest issue is that because of the enormity of these, these one-offs, not everybody's making these big-time salaries. Some of them are. Not everybody are actually making these salaries. But the majority of what's happening in college athletics is that now we're so visible, and then now we're talking about how this thing works, and now we've been exposed on the conversation about finances and how it's going to be sustained if we don't have a base of face-to-face contact. I think that what we should do is review how the operation is to make sure we're much leaner in what we're doing so we can sustain these rainy days, like you just said. Because not everybody's going to have the ability to be able to have a reserve in excess of $100 million to deal with that. It's just not going to happen in the model and the mission of most higher education institutions. So that's my viewpoint of it. It may be flawed, but I could probably go into a number of other industries that are also flawed.
Everybody being exposed right now.
There's bailouts that were given to the car industry. There was bailouts that were given. I can go down to a number of industries that are like that. But I think that's really important now as we go through this crisis is to take a look at our operations and let's kind of take a look at some of the fat and let's kind of boil that down. And let's try to get a hold.
What are some of the potential areas of fat that could be consistent?
And again, it's all about the institution itself. It's so individualistic about it, right? So you could look at staffing. You could look at what the money is actually going toward. You're taking a look at how our legislation from the NCAA and what we need to keep as minimums to make sure that things run. So there's so many different quality controls of that. So it really depends on the institution itself. We have a certain number of sports that we have to keep. We have to make sure the offerings are correct. We have to make sure the gender equity in the Title IX.
That was the one I wanted to get in, because I'm nervous about how gender equity is going to be handled when we're talking about, I know we have legislatively required through Title IX and others, but, institutions might make some decisions that end up, if they believe that they can't maintain the kinds of sports they want to maintain, folks might opt to shut down altogether. People might, because of the requirements you have to have around Title IX. And, I think the SEC's been interesting the way they have 13, 14 sports a lot of times in most of their institutions. When I look at a number of those institutions versus something, Ohio State's got 30 something sports. And when you're thinking about how they,
most of the Big Ten. The Big Ten have those preferences.
Big Ten has those large portfolio. I mean, I saw the way you develop women's hockey at Wisconsin and support you put into those programs and other women's programs. Your investment in terms of that, how are people keeping an eye on kind of the gender equity aspect of this through these hard times? Because a lot of tough decisions are being made. How is that kind of DEI lens being placed on the equity?
Well, it needs to be. I'm very much a proponent of supporting diversity, inclusion, gender equity, and Title IX. So that's a fabric of my being, and we need to make sure that we do not sacrifice those offerings for those young people. Those young people deserve those opportunities. So, Yes, I'm a diehard when it comes to that, because I think at the end of the day, that's the quintessential thing of being a part of a college athlete. Yeah. If you want to go pro, there's a pro spot for you. Okay. Yeah. At the college level, we have a wide variety of different sports, and they are inclusive of women's sports, and that's the way the deal is. That's why it's a very difficult and very complex operation in higher ed, relative to just trying to run a business format, pro forma, around college athletics. Because if that's the case, we would only have one or two sports from a financial standpoint that was making money. But in college athletics, we're dealing with a wide plethora of different sports, and they are made of Olympic sports and others that don't necessarily bring in the big time revenue. So that's quite frankly, that's the job. That's the work. Yeah. That's the ability. You have to be able to manage through that. And if you can't manage through that, you're going to have some very complex challenges and issues to be able to put your athletic department in a proper balance sheet. So I don't want to see a reduction in women's sports or any Olympic sport, mind you, that's not a revenue sport, because of the fact that it financially doesn't look right. I think that we have to make sure we take a look at how do we make it right? How do we make it right in a way that we can run this and provide these opportunities for these young men and women, and that we do it at a very high level. I'm not saying that, a particular number. I think some sports, some institutions are still carrying, I know the Ivies are, I believe Stanford, some of these larger 38 to 40 sports. That's a very difficult way to manage at this day and age because of the finances associated with that. But I certainly would hate to see a reduction in men's and women's Olympic sports because of some of this hardship around finances right now. Because I think ultimately it's short-sighted, and I think it's going to hurt our Olympic movement for the future. So I'm not a proponent to start chopping and cutting because we're having some adversity around finance, especially at the college level, because amateur sports, the quintessential amateur sports, is to have these offerings and to be able to support our mission. So that's my viewpoint anyway.
Well, what's interesting is, as we are, you've been involved in a lot of conversation about what's happening with the people on campus, but we also are in this enrollment side. And one of the things that my working with athletics, these days, is one of the important things I've realized about onboarding new athletes is that summer program. I think people have gotten better and got more sophisticated with that summer program of not just preparing them to be, ready for their athletic sport, but the academic engagement, the way in which they set the team culture around being a student athlete. Now we're pretty much going to be looking at a virtual experience. How are y'all dealing with that? How are y'all thinking about the onboarding of your new athletes? Particularly football is a big user of that summer term experience as a great way of bringing in their class. What are some of the things that y'all are trying to do to be innovative in terms of the orientation of athletes who are transitioning out of very difficult high school circumstances, didn't have a prom, some of them didn't finish their seasons, and they're trying to onboard into college sports?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. We're still developing pieces of that right now. That's going to be really a challenge, working with student affairs, working with academic affairs, orientation, programming. It starts with the coaches, right? Those head coaches have been cultivating, and it's not the first time that they've been interacting with them. So now we're beefing up the communication through the NCAA rules and regulations that we currently have, and then giving them a little taste about what college life is about. I've got I have a high school senior. She's about to graduate. She's an artist. She's going to be going to a prestigious art school that's unnamed that I'll talk about right now. We're going to unveil that this week at some point because she's got until May 1st to make her decision. But, they're already prepping already about what that's going to look like, right? Will they be coming to campus or will they be doing virtual, right? So we're prepping that, right? Because, again, the uncertainty, we don't know if they're going to have a chance to come onto campus. Their first class might be what we're doing right now, which is, their professor, and they might be introducing them to an online virtual orientation program. So we're developing that process right now and just getting the parents, the guardians to acknowledge the fact that this is part of the new normal. Won't be probably the long-term effect of this. This too shall pass, but this is what is going to be happening now. So we just have to continue to have those conversations with the young people and get their hopes up about, all right, you're going to have a college experience. No, it's not going to be behind the screen only, but you're going to have to do this, and we're going to have to make sure that you are eligible, that you are learning, that you're engaged, that there are expectations. This is different than high school. And then all that has to do with just continuously communicating with them from different mediums. So it's not just the coach that's communicating, it's the AD, it's the student affairs professional, it's the academic affairs, it's the faculty, it's the community. So we're coming up with this program as we speak to make sure that we have all these touches so we can continuously engage them into the college experience. And let me tell you, I don't know how that's going to be. I have not been involved with that as a higher education professional. I have taught classes online. I have. And it's a different experience than me teaching classes real time in front of someone. So I'll let you know, because I really don't know how that thing is going to look like at the end.
Well, I tell you right now, you are our eyes and ears into this, man. This is Change Management 101. Our brother Damon Williams, I've been talking to him, and he's been running some national conversations around helping folks transition, and he's just been doing an amazing job. We're gonna get him on.
Good.
I might have to get both of y'all on in
a good brother. Yeah,
conversation. But it sounds like you are involved in as we start to have some of these options flow out. I mean, I as the schedule starts to get more secure, as I know there are some people are thinking about some accelerated work that might be happening over here over the next month that might allow for a slow reopening of the economy. And so I always felt like we'll know something by the end of April. We should have a clear sight line. We just have too many smart people working on this. And we should have a much clearer sight line. We've already made up a lot of ground here in 3 or 4 weeks nationally around some of this stuff. My thought is we'll have something soon, but I rely on your voice, man. Like I said, I follow you as well. Please let the folks know how they can follow you, where they can catch you on social media, because I know you're often offering stuff, and I love to have some of our folks in the lounge and others, follow you. I know the Husky Nation folks who are listening, they're gonna be following you no matter what. They're already online. But in terms of other folks, how can they reach you?
Well, NIU obviously NIUathletics.com. So right away, you want to do that. So NIUhuskies.com is the way. I want you to my our athletic site, number one. So that's really it. My Twitter handle, I don't even know my Twitter handle, to be perfectly honest with you, but I think it's at Sean T. Frazier. So at
Sean T. Frazier.
Yep. At SEANT Frazier, FRAZIER. So that's the Twitter handle. I had to look up to make sure I'm good with that.
You do your thing on it, but you like me, I had to look mine up as well. Stuff like that. But we want people to hit the message, because usually you hit them with it early and hit them with it first. And I guess I want you to maybe if you have anything else that you want to touch on here before we wrap, to kind of drop the mic with our lounge folks. I want to give you a chance, a minute just to share whatever you want to share, whether it's a message to the NIU fam or whatever. We want to give you a minute to just share whatever your final thoughts are.
Yeah. So, I think for us, I've done a number of videos to try to talk a little bit about our operations. This was probably more introspective of what's happening in the industry. But I think for NIU, it's just keep on keeping on. I think that the biggest thing is that to stay safe, you guys should be staying at home. Again, to stay safe, you should be staying at home. This too is going to pass, but I think that right now we're seeing an alarming rate of individuals still being infected and still passing away. We're seeing an alarming rate, especially on the African-American side of things. From a percentage standpoint, I think that's alarming. I think the newest statistic was almost 69 to 70% of African-Americans are are contracting COVID-19 and passing away. I don't know exactly why that is. I haven't done my research yet about that, but that is also a very alarming rate. But I think for the NIU alumni is that we are going to be okay. We just need your support. We need the continuous amount of engagement. I really, really have been humbled by the way that our staff, our students, our community, our alumni have engaged and stepped up during this time of crisis. So, like I said before, we are battle tested. We've had lots of adversity in our past, and it's great to be able to watch this and see this. So, again, I just say, just keep on keeping on. We'll get after it, and anything that I can do personally, please let me know. And at the end of the day, let's go Huskies.
All right. There we go. There we go. This is RSG live in the lounge, and this is your man D. Wilson. And in closing, I want to send my condolences out to Carl Anthony Towns. His mother, Jacqueline Cruz Towns, passed away, complications with the coronavirus, and it's touching a lot of folks. And I also want to dedicate this show to my man CJ Corey Jackson, who we buried too soon. Was a student athlete I played with, who incredible human being, leader, did a lot of work in the city of Milwaukee. It's hard because we're not able to come together as a community and send somebody home. We have to do this sporadically, or we're going to have 10 of us in the funeral. But, I just wanted to, make sure that we acknowledge it and be there and be there to support the families who are dealing with, just the tragedies associated with the times that we live in. Hey, it's RSG. We always going to keep it moving. And y'all be well, stay true. You can catch us on realsportsguys.com. Catch all our stuff. You can catch us Real Sports Guys on Facebook. And we look forward to the next time that we go live in the lounge. Until next time, take care.